The little girl's voice cut through the cheerful holiday music like a blade through silk. Julian Grant had been walking past the department store Santa display, his mind occupied with quarterly projections and merger negotiations, when those words stopped him cold. My mommy is sick, but she still works. The child couldn't have been more than 6 years old. She wore a faded pink jacket that had seen too many winters, and her braided hair was coming loose at the ends. She sat on Santa's knee, her small hands gripping the white fur trim of his coat like it was a lifeline. Julian found himself frozen beside a display of winter scarves, pretending to examine merchandise while his entire focus narrowed to that conversation happening 15 feet away. She coughs all the time now, the girl continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried in the busy store. At night, I hear her in the bathroom. She tries to be quiet so I won't wake up, but I do. And in the morning there's blood on the tissues in the trash, but she hides them under other stuff. She thinks I don't see. The Santa, a tired-looking man with a real beard, shifted uncomfortably. Have you told anyone about this, sweetheart? Mommy says we can't afford doctors. She says if she stops working we'll lose our apartment. We already lost our car last month. She works at 3 places now. She cleans offices at night after I go to sleep. Mrs. Patterson from downstairs watches me. Mommy comes home and sleeps for 2 hours, then goes to her morning job at the laundry place. Then she has her afternoon job at the grocery store. Julian felt something crack open in his chest. The girl's matter-of-fact tone made it worse somehow. She wasn't crying or begging. She was simply stating facts, the way children do when they've learned that tears don't change reality. What's your name, honey? Santa asked gently. Bree Morrison. My mommy's name is Tanya Morrison. She's really nice. She makes me pancakes every Sunday even though she's tired. She helps me with my homework every night. She reads me stories. But Santa, I'm scared. What if she gets so sick she can't wake up one morning? The girl's voice finally cracked on those last words, and Julian watched as tears began streaming down her brown cheeks. The Santa pulled her into an awkward hug, looking around helplessly as if hoping a parent would appear to handle this situation that was clearly above his pay grade. I just want my mommy to be okay, Bree sobbed into the red velvet suit. I don't want any toys. I don't need anything for Christmas. I just want her to stop coughing. I want her to smile like she used to before Daddy left. I want her to not be so tired all the time. Can you do that, Santa? Can you make my mommy better? Julian's hands had formed fists at his sides. The silk scarves he'd been pretending to examine hung forgotten as memories flooded back. Himself at 7 years old, wearing shoes with holes in the soles, watching his own mother work herself into exhaustion. The sound of her coughing through thin apartment walls. The fear that lived in his stomach like a stone, the certainty that one day she would simply stop breathing and he would be alone. She had stopped breathing, eventually, when he was 12. Pneumonia that she'd ignored for too long because she couldn't afford to miss work. By the time she'd finally gone to the hospital, it was too late. He'd sworn then, shivering in a social worker's office, that if he ever had money, he would never let anyone suffer like that. Never let any child feel that particular flavor of helplessness. The Santa was giving Bree a candy cane and some gentle words about believing and hoping. Standard script. Meaningless comfort. Julian waited until Bree climbed down and walked away, her small figure disappearing into the crowd of shoppers. Then he moved. His long strides ate up the distance to the Santa's platform. The girl who just left, he said without preamble. Bree Morrison. Did she say anything else? Any other details? The Santa blinked up at him. People were staring. Julian Grant was recognizable. His face had been on the cover of 3 business magazines in the last month alone. At 38, he was one of the youngest self-made billionaires in the country, the CEO of Grant Industries, a tech and real estate empire he'd built from nothing. Sir, I'm not sure I should. Julian pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. He turned the screen so the Santa could see it. I'm going to help that little girl and her mother. But I need to find them first. Anything you remember could matter. Please. The Santa's eyes widened at whatever he saw on that screen. She mentioned the laundry facility where her mother works. Said something about Jefferson Street. And the grocery store, she said it was the one with the green sign. There's only one of those in this neighborhood, the Fresh Value on Park Avenue. Thank you. Julian transferred an amount into the store's charity fund that made the Santa's eyes nearly pop out of his head. Then he was moving again, pulling up maps on his phone, his brain already shifting into the analytical mode that had made him successful. There were 3 laundry facilities on Jefferson Street. He would check them all if necessary. Tomorrow morning, early before the day shift started, he would find Tanya Morrison and he would help her, and this time the story would end differently than his own had. Have you ever heard something that changed your entire day, maybe even your life? What would you do if you overheard a child's desperate wish? Drop a comment below and hit subscribe to see how this story unfolds. Your support means everything. The rest of the shopping crowd flowed around Julian as he stood there, phone in hand, making notes. A woman bumped his shoulder and apologized. Holiday music played on. Somewhere a child laughed. And somewhere in this city, a woman named Tanya Morrison was probably at work right now, coughing into her sleeve, trying to earn enough to keep a roof over her daughter's head while her body betrayed her one breath at a time. Julian had built his empire on decisive action, on seeing problems and solving them efficiently. But this felt different. More personal. More important than any business deal he'd ever negotiated. He thought about Bree's face, the way she'd clutched at hope in the form of a department store Santa. The way she'd whispered her mother's suffering like a confession. The way she'd asked for nothing for herself. Some children learned too young that the world was hard and indifferent. That safety was conditional. That the people they loved could be taken away by something as simple as illness and poverty. He had been one of those children. Bree was one of them now. But unlike his younger self, Bree had something his child self hadn't had. She had someone with the resources to actually help. Someone who had the power to change the ending of this particular story. Julian pulled up his contacts and called his personal assistant. Rachel? I need you to cancel my meetings for tomorrow morning. Something important has come up. Family matter. He'd never been married, had no children of his own. But in that moment, watching the spot where a little girl in a faded pink jacket had disappeared into the crowd, he felt a sense of responsibility as fierce as any parent's love. The store Santa was helping another child onto his lap now, going through the practiced motions. Asking about wish lists, promising magic. Julian walked toward the exit, his mind already racing ahead to tomorrow. To finding answers. To fixing what was broken. The cold December air hit his face as he stepped outside. The city glowed with holiday lights, with the promise of celebration and joy. For some people this was a season of abundance. Of family gatherings and gift exchanges and comfort. For others, it was just another month where the bills didn't care about holidays, where illness didn't pause for celebration, where survival took precedence over joy. He had lived in both worlds now. He understood both languages. The language of boardrooms and quarterly earnings, and the language of empty refrigerators and past due notices. That dual citizenship, that understanding of both worlds, was about to become the most important asset he possessed. Julian climbed into his car, a sleek black vehicle that cost more than most people earned in a year. The contrast wasn't lost on him. The irony of searching for a struggling woman while sitting in luxury. But wealth was only valuable if you did something meaningful with it. His mother had taught him that, in her own way, she'd had nothing but she'd given him everything she could. Well, values. The will to survive. Now he had everything materially speaking. But the lesson had stuck. The memory of powerlessness had never faded. The rage at a system that let people fall through the cracks, that made survival itself feel like a luxury. He would find Tanya Morrison. He would offer help. And unlike the vague promises of department store Santas, his help would be real. Concrete. Life-changing. The car pulled away from the curb, merging into the flow of holiday traffic. Julian's reflection stared back at him from the window glass. Same expensive suit. Same determined expression that had intimidated countless boardrooms. But underneath, in the part of him that remembered being young and scared and helpless, something had shifted. Some old wound had been touched, bringing with it both pain and purpose. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. Tomorrow he would start making things right. Not just for Bree Morrison but for the child he had once been. For every child who ever had to whisper their fears to strangers because the people who should have helped had failed them. The city lights blurred past as his driver navigated the evening streets. Julian pulled out his phone again, making more notes. Resources he could mobilize. Contacts who could help. The beginning of a plan. He had built an empire through careful planning and ruthless execution. Now he would apply those same skills to something far more important than profit margins. Somewhere in this city, a little girl was probably doing homework under dim lights, listening to her mother cough in the next room, trying not to cry because crying wouldn't change anything. Not yet. But soon. Julian Grant had heard her whisper, and he was coming. The sunrise painted the industrial district in shades of gray and pale blue. Julian had been sitting in his car across from the first laundry facility on Jefferson Street for 20 minutes, watching the workers arrive for the morning shift. His coffee had gone cold in the cup holder. This was the second location he'd checked. The first had been a dead end. According to the manager he'd spoken with, no Tanya Morrison worked there. But something about this place felt right. Maybe it was the way the workers trudged in, shoulders hunched against more than just the December cold. Exhaustion had a particular shape and Julian recognized it. Then he saw her. She emerged from a bus that had seen better days, one of 5 people who got off at this stop. Even from a distance she stood out. A beautiful African-American woman, probably in her early 30s, wearing a blue jacket that was too thin for the weather. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail. She carried herself with a straight spine despite the obvious weariness in her movements. But it was the cough that confirmed her identity. Even across the street, Julian could see her body shake with it. She pressed a tissue to her mouth, glanced at it quickly, then shoved it deep into her pocket. The gesture was furtive, practiced. Hiding evidence. Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. His mother had done the same thing. Hidden the blood, hidden the severity, hidden everything until hiding became impossible. Tanya Morrison disappeared into the laundry facility. Julian sat for a moment, weighing his options. He could go in now, confront the situation directly. But something held him back. Some instinct that told him he needed to understand the full scope of her situation before offering help. People were proud. People were cautious. If he came on too strong, she might refuse, and that refusal could cost her everything. He needed to know more. Needed to see the complete picture. So he waited. He called Rachel and had her reschedule his day. Then he waited some more. Tanya emerged 4 hours later, looking even more exhausted than when she'd entered. Her face was drawn and she moved more slowly. But she didn't go home. Instead, she walked 3 blocks to a small diner, went inside, and emerged 15 minutes later with what looked like a takeout container. Lunch probably. Something she could eat while commuting to her next job. Julian followed at a distance as she caught another bus. The route took them across town to a nicer neighborhood, the kind with well-maintained buildings and trees planted along the sidewalks. The Fresh Value grocery store with its distinctive green sign sat on a corner lot. She worked the afternoon shift there, Julian discovered. He went inside, browsing aisles he didn't need, watching her stock shelves and help customers. She smiled at people, patient and kind even when they were rude. Once, he saw her help an elderly man reach something on a high shelf, then spend 5 minutes talking with him about which brand was better. The old man left smiling. She took her breaks in the back room. Through the window, Julian could see her sitting with her head in her hands, her shoulders rising and falling with that terrible cough. But when her break ended, she stood up, straightened her uniform and went back out with that same patient smile. It was almost dark when her shift ended. Julian had spent the entire day following her, canceling meetings, ignoring his phone except to send brief messages to Rachel. His entire world had narrowed to this one woman's struggle, and the more he saw, the more determined he became. But the day wasn't over for Tanya Morrison. Not yet. She caught another bus as the street lights flickered on. This route took them downtown to the business district where office towers reached toward the sky. Julian's own building was visible from here, glass and steel reflecting the evening lights. The bus stopped near a service entrance. Tanya got off along with a handful of other people, all wearing similar practical clothes. Cleaning crews. The invisible workforce that scrubbed and polished after everyone else had gone home. Julian watched her enter the building. He waited 15 minutes, then used his connections to gain access to the security feeds. It wasn't strictly ethical, but he told himself this was different. This was important. The grainy black and white footage showed Tanya moving through offices, emptying trash cans, vacuuming floors. Slow, methodical work. Exhausting work. Work that didn't end until after midnight. Julian couldn't watch anymore. He left his car and walked the streets of downtown, processing what he'd seen. This woman worked 3 jobs. She probably slept 4 or 5 hours a night maximum. She was sick, possibly seriously ill, and she had no safety net. No family support, apparently, based on what Bree had told Santa. Just herself and her daughter, balanced on the knife's edge of survival. One missed shift could mean eviction. One doctor's visit could mean choosing between rent and food. One bad cough at the wrong time could mean losing a job. It was a trap with no escape route. Work until you literally couldn't anymore, then lose everything anyway. He'd seen it before. Lived it before. His mother had been caught in the same trap. The system that demanded you keep working even when working was killing you. The math that never added up no matter how hard you tried. But he had the power to break that trap now. He could be the variable that changed the equation. Julian looked up at the office tower where Tanya Morrison was cleaning toilets and mopping floors. Somewhere in there she was probably coughing into her sleeve, probably thinking about her daughter, probably calculating whether she could afford to buy Bree the winter boots she needed or whether they could make do with the ones from last year a little longer. He pulled out his phone and started making calls. First to his personal physician, the best in the city. Then to his real estate manager. Then to his HR director. By the time Tanya Morrison emerged from that building after midnight, exhausted and coughing, Julian had mobilized an entire support system. But he still had to approach her carefully. Had to offer help in a way she could accept without feeling like charity, without feeling like pity. He watched her catch the late-night bus home. Watched her get off in a neighborhood where the buildings were older, where chain-link fences separated small yards, where security bars covered windows. She walked to a small apartment building, climbed external stairs to the second floor, and let herself in. A light came on in one of the windows. Julian could see her silhouette moving around inside. Then the light went off. 2 hours of sleep, maybe, before she had to get up and do it all over again. He sat in his car outside her building for a long time, thinking. Planning. His phone buzzed with messages. Board members wanting decisions. Partners wanting meetings. A world that ran on his time and attention. But right now none of that mattered. Right now, the only thing that mattered was a woman and her daughter who deserved better than the hand life had dealt them. Julian had the resources. He had the will. Now he just needed the right approach. Tomorrow he would make contact. Tomorrow he would offer help. And this time he would make sure that help was accepted. Because some things were more important than pride. Some things were more important than independence. Sometimes accepting help was the bravest thing you could do. Tanya Morrison was about to learn that she didn't have to fight alone anymore. Whether she knew it yet or not, her life was about to change. Julian started his car and drove home through the empty streets. But he didn't sleep when he got there. Instead he sat at his desk and planned. By the time the sun rose again he had a strategy. And Julian Grant always executed his strategies perfectly. Julian found Tanya during her break at the laundry facility. He timed it carefully, watching through the window until he saw her head to the back room. Then he'd walked in, past the industrial washers and dryers, past the workers who didn't give him a second glance despite his expensive suit. She was sitting on a metal folding chair, eating a sandwich that looked like it had been made days ago. Her head was tilted back against the concrete wall, eyes closed. She looked so tired that Julian almost turned around, almost decided to wait for another time. But there was no good time. Every day she waited was another day her condition could worsen. Another day Bree had to worry. Tanya Morrison? Her eyes snapped open. She sat up straight, alert immediately despite her exhaustion. Defense mechanism probably. When you lived on the edge you learned to be ready for threats. Who's asking? Her voice was cautious. She sized him up quickly, taking in the suit, the confident posture. Probably trying to figure out if he was from the building management or worse, immigration or some kind of authority figure who meant trouble. My name is Julian Grant. I'm here to help you. He kept his voice gentle, non-threatening. May I sit? She looked at the empty chair across from her, then back at him. Help me with what? I don't know you. You don't. But I know you have a daughter named Bree. I know you work 3 jobs. And I know you're sick and you can't afford to see a doctor. The color drained from her face. Her hand went to her pocket, where she probably kept those blood-stained tissues. How do you? Are you following me? Are you some kind of stalker? No. Julian sat down without waiting for permission. I overheard Bree talking to Santa at the department store 3 days ago. She told him about you. About how worried she is. About how you cough blood at night and hide it from her. Tanya's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back furiously. You had no right to listen to that. That was private. That was between my daughter and a stranger in a rented suit who has no power to help her, Julian finished quietly. But I can help. I want to help. Please just hear me out. Why? The question came out sharp, defensive. Why would some random man want to help me? What do you want? It was a fair question. Julian had expected it. When I was 12 years old, my mother died of pneumonia. She'd been sick for weeks, but she couldn't afford to stop working. By the time she finally went to the hospital, it was too late. I ended up in foster care. Aged out at 18 with nothing. He watched Tanya's expression shift from suspicion to reluctant understanding. I built my company from the ground up. I'm the CEO of Grant Industries. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And when I heard your daughter begging Santa to save you, I remembered being that scared kid watching my mother cough her life away. I can't help her anymore. But I can help you. Tanya was quiet for a long moment. The industrial dryers rumbled in the background. Someone shouted something in Spanish. The normal sounds of work continued around them. What exactly are you offering? Her voice was careful, controlled. But Julian could see the hope struggling against the fear in her eyes. Medical care, first of all. I have a doctor on standby, the best in the city. He'll see you today if you're willing. All costs covered. Whatever treatment you need. Second, I own residential properties all over the city. I have a 2-bedroom apartment sitting empty right now. Good neighborhood near Bree's school. You can move in immediately. No rent. That's... Tanya's voice cracked. That's too much. I can't accept that. There has to be a catch. No catch. But there's more. I'd like to offer you a position at my company. Nothing glamorous but better hours, better pay, health insurance. The mailroom has an opening. Day shift, Monday through Friday. Weekends off. You'd make more than you're making at all 3 of your current jobs combined. Tanya stood up abruptly, pacing the small room. Her hands shook. This is crazy. People don't just do this. Rich men don't just hand out apartments and jobs to women they don't know. There's always a price. Always. Julian remained seated, keeping his body language open and non-threatening. I understand your skepticism. I do. But I'm not asking for anything in return except that you take care of yourself and your daughter. Let me be clear about something. He stood now too but kept his distance. I'm not interested in you romantically. I'm not trying to buy your gratitude or your company. I simply have resources that I can use to help someone who needs help, and I choose to use them this way. Why me though? There are thousands of people struggling in this city. Why am I special? You're not special, Julian said bluntly, then softened his tone at her flinch. I mean you are, but so is everyone else. The truth is, I heard your daughter's voice and it broke something open in me. Sometimes we can't help everyone, but we can help someone. You and Bree are my someone. Let me do this. Please. Tanya pressed her hands to her face. Her shoulders shook. When she lowered her hands, tears were streaming down her cheeks. I promised Bree I would accept kindness when it came. She made me promise last week, actually. She said I always help everyone else but never let anyone help us. She said maybe that's why we're stuck. Smart kid. She is. Tanya wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She's so much smarter than I was at her age. Kinder too. She deserves better than watching her mother fall apart. Then give her better. Take the help. Julian pulled a card from his pocket and held it out. This has my doctor's number on it. Call him today. The apartment address is on the back. The keys are with the building manager, Mrs. Chen. She's expecting you. You can move in whenever you're ready. Tanya took the card with trembling fingers. She stared at it like it might disappear if she looked away. I don't understand this. I don't understand you. But I'm too tired to keep fighting. And I'm too scared of what happens if I don't get help soon. She looked up at him, and the vulnerability in her eyes hit him like a physical force. Thank you. I don't know how to repay this, but thank you. You don't have to repay it. Just get healthy. Take care of Bree. That's all I ask. When can I start the job? Practical even in crisis. Julian respected that. Whenever you're ready. After you've seen the doctor, after you've moved. There's no rush. Your position will be waiting. Tanya nodded slowly. Then, to Julian's surprise, she laughed. It was a shaky, disbelieving sound. I'm standing in a laundry room talking to a billionaire who wants to give me a free apartment and a job. This is the weirdest day of my life. Wait until you see the apartment. It has a bathtub with jets. Julian smiled, trying to lighten the moment. Bree will love it. Fresh tears spilled down Tanya's cheeks. She hasn't had a real bath in 2 years. Our building only has showers, and half the time the hot water doesn't work. She used to love bubble baths when she was little. Something about that detail hit Julian harder than anything else. A little girl who used to love bubble baths, growing up in a place where even hot water was unreliable. All the small deprivations that added up to a childhood shadowed by scarcity. Then let's fix that, he said simply. Let's fix all of it. Tanya looked down at the card again. I should get back to work. I have 3 more hours on this shift. No. Julian shook his head. You're done. Go see the doctor. His office is downtown. I'll call ahead and let him know you're coming. Then go home, pack your things and move into the apartment. Today. Right now. But my job. I'll talk to your supervisor. I'll make sure you're compensated for the full week. You don't need this job anymore, Tanya. You never have to come back to this place. She looked around the dingy break room at the cracked concrete walls and the fluorescent lights that buzzed and flickered. At the time clock on the wall where she'd been punching in for months, trading her health for minimum wage. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay. I'll go." Julian walked her out to the main floor. He had a brief conversation with the supervisor, a hard-faced woman who looked skeptical but didn't argue when Julian handed her a check that covered 2 weeks of Tanya's wages plus a bonus. Money talked, even in laundry facilities. Tanya gathered her few belongings from a locker. A spare shirt. A water bottle. A photograph of Bree in a cheap frame. Small pieces of a life lived in the margins. They walked outside together. Julian's driver was waiting. "Get in. He'll take you to the doctor, then to your daughter's school. You can pick her up early today. Surprise her. Then he'll take you both to your old apartment to pack and then to your new one." Tanya hesitated at the car door. "I keep thinking I'm going to wake up. That this is some kind of dream." "It's real. I promise you it's real." Julian met her eyes. "You don't have to struggle alone anymore. Let that sink in. You have help now." She got into the car, moving like she was afraid sudden movements might shatter the moment. As the car pulled away, Julian saw her look back at him through the window, her expression a mixture of disbelief and desperate hope. He stood on the sidewalk outside the laundry facility and felt something settle in his chest. A rightness. A sense that for once he'd used his power and his wealth for exactly what they should be used for. His phone buzzed. Rachel, probably, with a list of things that needed his attention. The regular business of running an empire. But Julian didn't look at his phone. Instead, he watched the car disappear into traffic, carrying Tanya Morrison toward a different future. Toward medical care and safe housing and the chance to breathe without fear. Somewhere in a school across town, a little girl named Bree was sitting in class, probably worrying about her mother. In a few hours that worry would ease. In a few hours she'd learned that sometimes whispered prayers to department store Santas were actually heard. Not by magic. Not by Christmas miracles. But by people who had the power to help and chose to use it. Julian finally pulled out his phone and called Rachel. "Clear my schedule for the next week," he said. "I'm personally overseeing a new project." "What kind of project?" Rachel sounded curious. He rarely took such direct interest in individual initiatives. "The most important kind," Julian said, and he was surprised to find his own voice rough with emotion. "The kind that actually matters." The apartment was on the 5th floor of a building that had been renovated 3 years ago. Large windows let in afternoon light. The walls were painted in warm cream tones. The kitchen had modern appliances that actually worked. The bathroom had that promised bathtub with jets. Julian stood by the window, watching as Tanya and Bree explored their new home. He'd come by to check on them to make sure everything was in order. That's what he told himself anyway. The truth was more complicated. He wanted to see their reactions. Needed to, somehow. Bree ran from room to room, her eyes wide with wonder. "Mommy, there's a dishwasher. A real dishwasher. And look at this closet. It's huge. And the bathroom, Mommy, you have to see the bathroom." Tanya followed more slowly, touching things lightly as if afraid they might vanish. The countertops. The light switches. The window latches. Every surface seemed to surprise her with its quality, its solidity. She'd seen the doctor yesterday. Julian had gotten a full report with her permission. Chronic bronchitis, verging on pneumonia. Caused by a combination of overwork, poor living conditions and untreated respiratory infections. Treatable, thankfully. Antibiotics, an inhaler, and strict instructions to rest for at least 2 weeks. The circles under her eyes were still dark, but some of the tension had left her shoulders. She wore a green sweater that looked new. Probably the first new clothing she'd bought herself in months. "Mr. Grant," she said, turning to face him. "I don't know what to say. This is too much. This whole apartment is too much." It was sitting empty, Julian said, which was technically true. He'd moved out the previous tenant 2 days ago and paid them generously to relocate. But Tanya didn't need to know that. Better that someone uses it than it sits vacant. Bree came running back into the living room. She stopped when she saw Julian, suddenly shy. They hadn't been properly introduced yet. To her, he was just the man who had somehow given her mother everything she'd asked Santa for. "You must be Bree," Julian said, crouching down to her level. "I've heard a lot about you." "From Mommy?" Bree looked between them, trying to piece together the connections. "Actually, from Santa. I happened to be walking by when you were talking to him. I heard you say your mom was sick but still working. That seemed really unfair to me. So I decided to help." Bree's eyes went wide. "You heard me?" "But I whispered." Sometimes the most important things are said in whispers, Julian said gently. And sometimes people are listening even when you don't know it. Bree processed this for a moment. Then she did something that caught Julian completely off guard. She stepped forward and hugged him. Her small arms wrapped around his neck, and she pressed her face against his shoulder. "Thank you for helping my mommy," she said, her voice muffled by his suit jacket. "I was really scared. I thought she was going to die like Mrs. Patterson's husband died. He got sick and then one day he just didn't wake up anymore. I had bad dreams about mommy not waking up." Julian felt something crack in his chest. He hugged the child back, this little girl who had been carrying such heavy fears. "Your mom is going to be fine. The doctor says she just needs rest and medicine. She's going to get better." Bree pulled back and looked at him seriously. "Are you an angel? Mommy says angels help people sometimes." "No, I'm just a person. But I think maybe we're all supposed to help each other when we can. That's what makes the world work better." "I'm going to help people when I grow up," Bree announced. "I'm going to be a doctor so I can make sick people better. Or maybe I'll be rich like you so I can give people apartments when they need them." "You can be anything you want," Julian told her. "You're smart and kind. That's a good start." Tanya had been watching this exchange with tears in her eyes. "Bree, sweetie, why don't you go try out that bathtub? You've been wanting a bubble bath for a long time." Bree's face lit up. "Really? Right now? In the middle of the day? Why not? We don't have anywhere to be." "Go ahead." Bree took off running. They heard the bathroom door close, then the sound of water running. Bree's excited voice carried through the walls, talking to herself about bubbles and jets and how this was the best day ever. Tanya sat down on the couch, suddenly unsteady. Julian sat in the chair across from her, giving her space. "I cried in the doctor's office yesterday," she said quietly, "when he told me what was wrong and what we were going to do to fix it. I cried because for months I've been terrified that it was something worse. Cancer maybe. Or something that would need surgery I could never afford. I laid awake at night imagining Bree at my funeral, wondering what would happen to her. You don't have to think about that anymore." "I know. That's what makes me cry now. Relief. I keep waiting for this to fall apart. For you to change your mind, or for there to be some condition I didn't understand, or for me to wake up and find out it was all a stress dream." She looked at him, her brown eyes searching his face. "Why are you really doing this, Julian? And please don't tell me it's just because you heard Bree talking to Santa. There has to be more." Julian leaned back in his chair. Outside the window, the city stretched out in every direction. From up here it looked clean and organized. You couldn't see the struggles happening on street level. Couldn't see the families choosing between food and heat, between medicine and rent. "My mother died when I was 12, he said. "I told you that. What I didn't tell you is that I was angry about it for years. Angry at her for not getting help sooner. Angry at the system that made it impossible for her to get help. Angry at myself for being too young to do anything useful." He paused, gathering his thoughts. Tanya waited, patient. "When I made my first million, I was 25 years old. I thought I'd feel different. Thought all that anger would go away because I'd proven that I could survive, that I could thrive. But it didn't go away. It just sat there inside me, this useless rage at something I couldn't change. My mother was still dead. All the money in the world couldn't fix that. So this is about her," Tanya said softly. "About doing for me what no one could do for her. Partly. But it's also about Bree. And about the kid I was, who felt so powerless. I can't go back and save my mother. I can't undo any of that pain. But I can make sure another child doesn't have to feel what I felt. I can change one story, even if I can't change my own." Tanya nodded slowly. "I get that. I think I really do. But Julian, you're not responsible for saving everyone. You know that, right? You can't fix all the broken things in the world." "I know. But I can fix this one thing. And that has to be enough." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. In the bathroom, Bree was singing something off-key. The sound of child's laughter, uncomplicated joy. "Tell me about the job," Tanya said. "What exactly would I be doing?" "The mailroom handles all incoming and outgoing correspondence. Sorting, distribution, some light packaging. It's entry-level work, but it comes with full benefits. Health insurance, dental, vision. Paid time off. There's room for advancement too. Several people have moved from the mailroom into other departments. Administrative support, human resources, even a few into management." "And you're sure you're not creating this position just for me? I don't want to take a job that doesn't really exist." "The position is real. The previous employee left to have a baby. We've been short-handed for 2 weeks. You'd actually be helping us out by filling it. Tanya looked down at her hands. I haven't worked in an office before. I don't have a college degree. Most of my experience is food service and cleaning. That's fine. We'll train you. The mailroom supervisor is a woman named Patricia Lee. She's patient and good at her job. You'll like her. When do I start? Not for at least 2 weeks. Doctor's orders. You need to rest and let the antibiotics work. Use this time to settle in. Enroll Bree in the school around the corner if you want. It's a good school, much better than her current one. Spend time with your daughter without worrying about getting to your next shift. Sleep. Actually sleep for the first time in months. Tanya's eyes filled with tears again. You say that like it's simple. Like I can just flip a switch and stop worrying. I know it's not simple. But try. You're allowed to rest now. You're allowed to stop running. She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her green sweater. I don't know how to do that. I've been in survival mode for so long. Since my husband left, actually. That was 3 years ago. He just left one day. Packed a bag while I was at work and Bree was at school. Left a note saying he couldn't do it anymore. Couldn't handle the pressure of trying to make ends meet. Couldn't handle being a father. Anger flashed through Julian. He abandoned you both? Pretty much. I got a divorce lawyer from legal aid. He didn't contest it, didn't ask for custody. Didn't even ask to see Bree. Just signed the papers and disappeared. Last I heard he was in another state. I don't even know if he thinks about her. His loss, Julian said firmly. Bree is amazing. Any father would be lucky to have her. She misses him sometimes. She doesn't say it, but I know. She sees other kids with dads and I can see the question in her eyes. Why didn't ours stay? What was wrong with us that made him leave? Nothing was wrong with you. Nothing was wrong with Bree. He was broken in some way that had nothing to do with either of you. I tell her that. I tell her she's perfect and loved and that his leaving wasn't her fault. But I don't know if she really believes it. How can she, when the evidence is that her father chose to leave? Julian thought about his own father, a man he'd never known. Just a name on a birth certificate, nothing more. The parents who leave teach us things they never meant to teach. They show us what we don't want to become. They make us stronger, even though we wish we'd never needed to become strong in that particular way. You sound like you've thought about this a lot. I have. My father left before I was born. Never met him. For years, I wondered what was wrong with me that made him not want to stick around. Eventually I realized it had nothing to do with me. I was just a baby. I was innocent. Whatever was broken in him existed before I did. Did that help? Knowing it wasn't about you? Eventually. It took time. But yes, it helped. And it helped more when I stopped thinking about what I'd lost and started thinking about what I still had. My mother loved me fiercely. That was enough. It had to be enough. Tanya smiled, small and sad. Bree has that. She has me loving her fiercely. I just wish I could give her more than love. You're giving her more now. Stability. Safety. A home where the hot water always works. A mother who isn't coughing blood. That's not nothing. That's everything, Tanya corrected quietly. That's everything I've wanted to give her and couldn't. Until now. She met Julian's eyes. Until you. The gratitude in her voice made Julian uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair. You would have figured something out. You were already doing everything possible. I was drowning. Let's be honest. I was working myself to death and it still wasn't enough. If you hadn't helped, I don't know what would have happened. I don't like to think about it. Then don't. Think about what happens next instead. Think about getting healthy. About Bree thriving. About building a life that doesn't require constant crisis management. Bree emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a towel, her hair dripping. Mommy, that was the best bath ever. The jets make bubbles go everywhere. Can I take another bath tomorrow? You can take a bath every single day if you want, Tanya said, her voice thick with emotion. Every day. Bree's eyes went wide. Really? Really? That's what having your own bathtub means. You can use it whenever you want. Bree processed this information like it was the most amazing thing she'd ever heard. Then she looked at Julian. Do you have a bathtub with jets? I do actually. 3 of them. 3? Bree's voice was awed. Why do you need 3 bathtubs? I have a big house. Different bathrooms. Though honestly, I mostly just take showers. The bathtubs mostly just sit there. That's sad, Bree said seriously. Bathtubs should be used. They're too nice to just sit there. Julian found himself smiling. You're absolutely right. I'll have to take a bath tonight, just so my bathtub doesn't feel neglected. Bree giggled at that. Bathtubs don't have feelings, silly. Are you sure? How do you know? She thought about it. I guess I don't know. Maybe they do have feelings. I'll be extra nice to ours just in case. That's very thoughtful of you. Bree went to her mother. Mommy, can we have dinner in our new kitchen? Can we use the stove and everything? We can. What do you want to make? Spaghetti. With the sauce you make from scratch. The good kind. Tanya hesitated. I'm not sure we have groceries yet, sweetie. We'll need to go shopping. Already handled, Julian said, standing up. I had my assistant stock the kitchen with basics. Check the pantry and the refrigerator. You should have everything you need. Tanya stood and walked to the kitchen. She opened the pantry to find it full. Pasta, sauce, canned goods, baking supplies. The refrigerator was the same. Fresh vegetables, milk, eggs, cheese. A full complement of groceries. She turned back to Julian, and this time when she cried, she didn't try to hide it. You thought of everything. I tried. If there's anything missing, just let me know. There's nothing missing. There's more here than we've had in years. She wiped her eyes. Stay for dinner. Please, let us cook for you. It's the least we can do. Julian started to refuse. Keeping boundaries was important. This was help, not friendship. Not relationship. Just a billionaire using his resources to assist someone in need. But then Bree looked at him with those hopeful eyes, and he found himself saying, Spaghetti sounds great. I'd love to stay. The smile that broke across both their faces was worth more than any business deal he'd ever closed. How powerful would it be if more people with resources chose kindness like this? If you're enjoying this journey of hope and transformation, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments. What would you do if you had the power to change someone's life? 3 weeks passed. Tanya started work at Grant Industries on a Monday morning, her first day back to employment after the forced rest. Julian had made a point of not visiting the apartment during those 3 weeks. He wanted to give her space, wanted her to settle in without feeling watched or obligated. But Patricia Lee reported that Tanya was doing well, learning quickly, asking good questions, getting along with the rest of the mailroom staff. Julian found himself thinking about them more often than he expected, wondering how Bree was doing in her new school, whether Tanya's cough had improved. Small details that had no bearing on his business operations but somehow felt important anyway. He told himself it was natural curiosity. Investment in the outcome of his charity. Nothing more. Then Tanya showed up at his office door on a Friday afternoon. His assistant, Rachel, escorted her in with a puzzled expression. Ms. Morrison to see you, Mr. Grant. She says it's important. Julian looked up from his computer. Tanya stood in the doorway of his office, wearing a red cardigan over dark pants. Professional but modest. Her hair was down today, falling past her shoulders. She looked healthier than she had 3 weeks ago. The circles under her eyes were fading. She'd gained a little weight. Tanya, is everything okay? Do you need something? His mind immediately went to problems. Issues with the apartment. Trouble at work. Something wrong with Bree. No, everything's fine. Better than fine, actually. I just wanted to talk to you about something. Do you have a few minutes? Of course. Come in. Close the door if you want. He gestured to the chairs across from his desk. She closed the door and sat down. For a moment she just looked around his office, taking in the view from the windows, the expensive furniture, the subtle markers of power and wealth. This is quite a space, she said finally. It's a bit much sometimes, Julian admitted. But it helps with the image. Clients expect a certain aesthetic. I can imagine. She folded her hands in her lap. I wanted to thank you again. And I know you probably think I've thanked you enough, but I needed to say it one more time. You saved us. My life, Bree's life. You saved us both. You're doing well in the mailroom from what I hear. Patricia says you're a fast learner. Everyone's been really kind. Patient while I figure things out. It's different from my other jobs. People treat me like I'm a person, not just a pair of hands. That's how it should be. I know. But it's not always. You know that. She paused. I've been thinking a lot about why you helped us. I know what you told me about your mother and wanting to change one story. But I think there's more to it than that. Julian leaned back in his chair. What do you mean? I think you're lonely. I think you've built this amazing empire and you have all this money and power, but you don't have people. Real people who care about you, not your bank account. Am I wrong? The observation was so unexpected, so accurate, that Julian didn't have an immediate response. He'd been thinking of himself as the helper, the benefactor. He hadn't considered that she might be analyzing him in return. I have people, he said finally. Friends? Colleagues. Do you? Or do you have business associates and professional relationships? When's the last time someone cooked you dinner just because they wanted to? When's the last time you spent time with someone who didn't want anything from you? Julian thought about it. Tried to remember. It's been a while, he admitted. Exactly. So here's what I'm proposing. Bree and I would like you to come to dinner on Sunday. Real dinner at the apartment. Nothing fancy, just food and conversation. As friends, not as benefactor and recipient of charity. Can you do that? I don't want to intrude on your time. You wouldn't be intruding. We're inviting you. Bree asks about you constantly. She wants to show you her new school project. And honestly, I'd like to get to know you better. Not as the man who saved us, but as Julian. The person under all this. She gestured at his office, at the trappings of success. It was a simple invitation. Dinner with a woman and her daughter. Nothing complicated about it. So why did it feel significant? Why did accepting feel like crossing some invisible line? Okay, Julian heard himself say. Sunday dinner sounds nice. What time? 6 o'clock? And please don't bring anything. Just yourself. I usually bring wine when I'm invited to dinner. Then bring wine if it makes you feel better. But you don't need to impress us. We're already impressed. She smiled and it transformed her face. For the first time, Julian saw what she must have looked like before exhaustion and stress had carved lines around her eyes. Beautiful. Not just physically, though she was that. But beautiful in the way that kindness and strength made someone glow from within. I'll be there, he said. She stood up. Good. I should get back to work. I'm still on probation period, technically. Don't want to be late getting back from my break. Tanya, wait. Julian stood as well. You're not on probation. I mean, technically yes, but Patricia already told me you're doing great. You don't have to worry about losing this job. I worry anyway. Old habits. She moved toward the door. See you Sunday, Julian. After she left, Julian sat back down at his desk. He looked at his computer screen, at the spreadsheet full of numbers that suddenly seemed less important than they had 10 minutes ago. Rachel poked her head in. Everything okay? She seemed happy. She invited me to dinner. Rachel's eyebrows went up. That's nice. Good for you getting out more. You work too much. It's not like that. It's just a friendly dinner. She wanted to thank me. If you say so. Rachel's tone suggested she didn't quite believe him. Julian didn't respond. He wasn't sure he believed himself. Sunday arrived faster than expected. Julian found himself standing outside Tanya's apartment door at exactly 6 o'clock, holding a bottle of wine that probably cost more than she used to make in a week. He almost left it in the car. But she'd said to bring it if it made him feel better, and oddly enough, it did. Bree opened the door. She wore a blue dress with white flowers on it, and her hair was in 2 neat braids. Julian, you came. Mommy said you would, but I was still worried you might be too busy. I made time, he said, stepping inside. You look very nice. Thank you. Mommy did my hair. It took forever because I kept wiggling. She took his hand and pulled him toward the kitchen. Come see what we made. It's chicken and vegetables and rice. And there's cake for dessert. We made the cake from scratch. I helped with the frosting. The apartment smelled amazing. Tanya stood at the stove, stirring something in a pan. She wore a dark purple dress that fell to her knees, simple but elegant. Her hair was pulled back in a clip. She turned when they entered. Hi. Perfect timing. Everything's just about ready. It smells incredible. Julian held out the wine. I know you said not to bring anything, but wine is perfect. Thank you. She took the bottle and examined the label. Her eyes widened slightly. This is really nice wine. I have a guy. He picks out good ones. Of course you do. But she was smiling. Bree, can you help me set the table? Julian, make yourself comfortable. This will just take a few minutes. Julian sat at the small dining table while Bree and Tanya moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. They had a rhythm together, a shorthand that came from being each other's only family. Bree knew where the plates were without being told. Tanya could hand her daughter a stack of napkins without looking, trusting they would be caught. The dinner table was set with care. Mismatched plates but clean and arranged nicely. A candle in the center. Flowers in a vase. They sat down to eat, and for a moment Julian just looked at the scene. This small table, this simple meal. The comfortable domesticity of it. How long had it been since he'd experienced anything like this? Years. Maybe a decade. His life was restaurants and hotel rooms. Takeout eaten at his desk. Efficient calories consumed between meetings. This is really nice, he said. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for coming, Tanya replied. Bree's been planning this meal for 3 days. She had strong opinions about the menu. I wanted to make something special, Bree explained. Because you did something special for us. They ate and the conversation flowed easily. Bree talked about her new school, about the friend she'd made named Sophia, about the science project they were working on together about volcanoes. Tanya talked about her job, about how different it was to work in a place where people said good morning, and asked about her weekend. Julian found himself talking too, sharing stories he rarely told. About building his company from nothing. About the first investor who'd believed in him. About the failures that had taught him more than the successes. What made you want to start a business in the first place? Tanya asked. Most people get a regular job and settle into a routine. What made you think you could do something bigger? Julian thought about how to answer. Anger initially. I was angry at the world for being unfair. Angry at the system that had failed my mother. I wanted to prove that someone like me, from where I came from, could succeed. Could beat the odds. And then the anger faded, but the drive didn't. I realized I actually enjoyed the challenge. Building something. Solving problems. Creating jobs for people. It became less about proving anything and more about seeing how far I could take it. Do you ever think about stopping? About just enjoying what you've built? Tanya poured them both more wine. Sometimes. But I don't know what I'd do with myself. Work is what I know. It's what I'm good at. That's sad, Bree said, her voice thoughtful. You should have hobbies. Things you do just for fun. You sound like my therapist, Julian said, then realized he'd admitted to having a therapist. You see a therapist? Tanya looked surprised. Once a month. Have for years. Best decision I ever made, actually. Helps me sort through things. Keep perspective. What kind of things? The usual. Work stress. Relationship issues, though I don't have many relationships to have issues with. Childhood trauma. The whole package. He said it lightly, but Tanya's expression softened. Good for you. I always thought I should see someone, especially after my husband left. But I couldn't afford it. You can now. The health insurance from work covers mental health services. You should use it if you want. Maybe I will. She looked thoughtful. It might be good to talk to someone. To process everything that's happened. The bad stuff and the good stuff. They moved to the living room after dinner. Bree showed Julian her school project, a carefully constructed model of a volcano complete with vinegar and baking soda for eruptions. She demonstrated it in the bathtub, delighted when the foam overflowed dramatically. Later, after Bree went to bed, Julian and Tanya sat on the couch, coffee in hand, talking in the comfortable way of people who'd known each other longer than they actually had. Can I ask you something? Tanya said. And you can tell me if it's too personal. Go ahead. Why aren't you married? Or with someone? You're successful, attractive, clearly kind. I'd think people would be lining up. Julian smiled ruefully. People line up for what I have, not who I am. It's hard to know the difference sometimes. I've dated, but it never goes anywhere. Either they're intimidated by the money or they're too interested in the money. Finding someone who sees me as just me is harder than you'd think. I can imagine. Everyone wants something from you. Except you. Julian met her eyes. You didn't want anything from me. You fought against accepting help. I wanted my daughter to be safe and healthy. I would have swallowed my pride for that. But you're right, I didn't want you. I wanted what you could provide. There's a difference. And now? The question came out before Julian could stop it. Tanya was quiet for a moment. Now I see you as a person. Complicated. Driven. Kind but guarded. Lonely, I think, even though you probably don't admit it to yourself often. You remind me of Bree in some ways. You've both learned to be careful with trust. Careful isn't always bad. No. But it can be isolating. She set down her coffee cup. I'm glad you came tonight. I think you needed this as much as we did. Maybe I did, Julian admitted. He left an hour later, driving home through city streets that suddenly felt less familiar. The evening had shifted something in him. Some assumption about the boundaries between helper and helped, about the limits of what he was doing. This wasn't just charity anymore. It was becoming something else. Something he didn't have a name for yet. And that should have worried him. Should have sent him into careful retreat, maintaining professional distance. But instead, all he felt was anticipation for the next time he'd see them. For the next dinner invitation. For the next easy conversation that made the world feel less harsh. He'd spent years building walls. Maybe it was time to let someone pass them. The next 4 weeks passed in a comfortable rhythm. Julian found himself at the apartment most Sunday evenings. Sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to visit. Bree would show him her homework or a new book she'd read. Tanya would make coffee and they'd talk while Bree did puzzles or drew pictures. It became normal. Expected. The highlight of Julian's week, though he didn't admit that to anyone, especially not himself. At work, Patricia Lee pulled him aside one afternoon. She was a small woman in her 50s, with short black hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Can I speak with you privately?" she asked. They went to his office. Julian gestured for her to sit. "It's about Tanya Morrison," Patricia said. Julian tensed. "Is there a problem with her work?" "No, her work is exemplary. That's actually what I wanted to talk about. She's too good for the mailroom. She has organizational skills that are being wasted on sorting mail. I'd like to move her to my assistant position. My current assistant is leaving next month to go back to school. Tanya would be perfect for the role." Relief washed through Julian. "That sounds like a great opportunity for her." "It is. Better pay, more responsibility, room for advancement. But here's the thing, Mr. Grant." Patricia leaned forward. "I need to know that you hired her for legitimate reasons. Not because you're interested in her romantically." Julian's defenses rose immediately. "I hired her because she needed a job. Because she was qualified. She was overqualified if anything. A woman who managed to work 3 jobs while raising a child alone has serious skills. But that doesn't answer my question. Are you interested in her?" "That's not appropriate to ask. Actually, as her potential supervisor, it's very appropriate. If there's a personal relationship complicating the professional one, I need to know. For her protection as much as yours." Julian stood and walked to the window. The city spread out below, busy with afternoon traffic. "I like her. As a person. I enjoy spending time with her and her daughter. But I'm not pursuing anything romantic. She's been through enough. The last thing she needs is her benefactor making things complicated." "But you want to," Patricia said quietly. "Want to pursue something, I mean." Julian didn't turn around. "It doesn't matter what I want. What matters is what's best for her and Bree. What if what's best for them is having you in their lives? Not as some distant benefactor, but as someone who actually cares about them." "I do care about them." "I know. Everyone can see it. The way your face changes when someone mentions Tanya's name. The way you check the mailroom schedule to know when she's working. You're not as subtle as you think you are." Julian finally turned around. "Even if I did have feelings, which I'm not confirming, acting on them would be inappropriate. I'm her employer. I provided her apartment. There's a massive power imbalance." "There is. But there are ways to address that. If you're serious about her, if you think this could be something real, then we need to put safeguards in place. Make sure she knows she's safe regardless of what happens between you personally. Make sure she has an exit that doesn't cost her everything." "I'm not sure what I'm feeling," Julian admitted. "I've never felt quite like this before. It's not just attraction, though she's beautiful. It's more than that. I feel lighter when I'm with them. Like I can breathe easier. Like life makes more sense." Patricia smiled. "That's called happiness, Mr. Grant. You should try it more often. It feels dangerous. Love usually does. But it's also worth it. Take it from someone who's been married 30 years. The risk is worth the reward. I'm not in love with her." But even as he said it, Julian knew he was lying. To Patricia and to himself. "If you say so." Patricia stood. "I'll offer Tanya the assistant position regardless. She deserves it. What you do with your personal feelings is your business. But Mr. Grant? Life is short. Happiness is rare. If you found it, don't let it go just because it's scary." After she left, Julian sat at his desk for a long time, thinking. He'd built his entire adult life on control. On calculated risks and careful planning. His emotions were kept in check. His personal life was minimal by design. Less attachment meant less potential loss. But Tanya and Bree had slipped past his defenses without him noticing. They'd become important. Essential even. The thought of not seeing them, of letting this connection fade, felt wrong in a way he couldn't articulate. That evening he went to the apartment without calling ahead. Tanya answered the door in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, her hair in a messy bun. She looked surprised to see him. "Julian? Is everything okay?" "Yes. No. I don't know. Can we talk?" "Of course. Come in." Bree's at Sophia's house for a sleepover. First one ever, actually. She was so excited. Tanya stepped back to let him in. "Do you want coffee? Or something stronger? You look like you might need something stronger." "Coffee is fine." They sat in the living room, coffee cups between them. Julian tried to figure out how to say what he needed to say. "Patricia offered you a promotion today," he said finally. "She did." Her assistant position. I was going to tell you on Sunday. It's a big opportunity. Better pay, better work. I'm really grateful. You should take it. You've earned it. I plan to. Tanya looked at him carefully. That's not why you're here though, is it? No. Julian set down his coffee cup. I've been thinking about what I want. What I'm doing here with you and Bree. And I need to be honest with you about it. Tanya's expression became guarded. Okay. I'm listening. I like you, Julian said. More than I should. More than is probably wise. I enjoy spending time with you. I think about you when I'm not here. I look forward to Sundays more than any other day of the week. And I don't know what to do about that. Tanya was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do about it? I want to see where this goes. I want to take you on a real date. I want to kiss you. I want to be more than just the man who helped you. But I'm terrified that if I pursue that, I'll ruin everything. You'll feel obligated because of what I did for you. Or you'll worry that rejecting me means losing your job and your apartment. There's no way to make this balanced. No way to remove the power dynamic. You're right, Tanya said. There isn't. No matter what you say, no matter what promises you make, I'll always know that you have the power to take everything away. That's just reality. Julian felt his heart sink. So we can't do this. I didn't say that. Tanya moved closer on the couch. Julian, I've been attracted to you since the day you walked into that laundry facility. At first, I thought it was gratitude. You saved us, so of course I felt drawn to you. But it's not just gratitude. You're smart and kind. You listen when I talk. You make Bree laugh. You see me as a person, not just someone to be rescued. Then what's stopping us? Fear. Same as you. I'm scared this won't work and I'll lose not just you but everything that came with you. I'm scared I'm not enough for someone like you. I'm scared that one day you'll realize I'm just a woman from the wrong side of town who didn't even finish college, and you'll wonder what you were thinking. That's not going to happen. You can't promise that. You don't know how you'll feel in 6 months or a year. People change their minds. Feelings fade. Her voice was sad, resigned. Not all feelings, Julian said. Some feelings grow stronger. Some connections matter more as time passes. How do you know this is one of those? How do we know this isn't just proximity and gratitude and the novelty of someone treating you like a regular person instead of a billionaire? We don't know. That's what taking a chance means. Stepping forward without guarantees. Tanya laughed, but it was a shaky sound. You're asking me to risk everything on maybe. I'm asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to believe that I wouldn't hurt you intentionally. That I value you too much to be careless with your heart. She looked at him, really looked at him. Whatever she saw in his face must have satisfied something, because she leaned in and kissed him. It was gentle, tentative. A question more than a statement. Julian responded carefully, keeping his hands still, letting her control the moment. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I'm terrified. Me too. If we do this, we do it slowly. For Bree's sake as much as ours. No rushing. No big declarations. Just seeing where it goes. I can do that. And if it doesn't work out, you promise that nothing changes with my job or the apartment. That Bree and I are safe no matter what happens between us. I promise. I'll put it in writing if you want. Legal documents that guarantee your position and housing regardless of our personal relationship. Tanya nodded slowly. Okay then. Let's try this. Let's see what happens when we stop fighting against what we feel. Julian pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder. They sat like that for a while, not talking, just being. The apartment was quiet around them. Outside, the city hummed with evening activity. What do we tell Bree? Julian asked eventually. The truth in age-appropriate terms. That we like each other and we're going to spend more time together. That you're special to both of us. She'll be thrilled, actually. She's been not so subtly suggesting I should marry you for weeks now. Julian laughed. Has she? Constantly. According to Bree, you're the best person ever and obviously perfect for me. 6-year-old logic. Smart kid. The smartest. Tanya pulled back to look at him. So what does dating a billionaire look like? Do we go to fancy restaurants and gallery openings? We can do whatever you want. Fancy or simple, I don't care. I just want to be with you. Can we start with simple? I'm not ready for your world yet. Let me ease into it. Simple is perfect. Julian kissed her forehead. We'll figure this out together. One day at a time. They talked until late into the night. About fears and hopes, about what they wanted from this relationship, about how to protect Bree through it all. By the time Julian left, something had fundamentally shifted between them. They weren't just friends anymore. They were something more. Something fragile and new, but also strong enough to have survived this far. Julian drove home feeling lighter than he had in years. The risk was real. The fear was justified. But Patricia had been right. Some things were worth the danger. And Tanya Morrison was definitely one of them. The date was Julian's idea. A simple dinner at a small restaurant in a neighborhood far from the business district. Somewhere they could be just two people eating pasta, not a billionaire and the woman he'd rescued. Tanya wore a maroon dress that brought out the warmth in her skin. She'd left her hair down, and it caught the candlelight in a way that made Julian's breath catch. "You look beautiful," he said when she arrived. "You clean up pretty well yourself." She smiled, but he could see the nervousness in the way her hands fidgeted with her purse. They ordered wine and appetizers. The conversation started awkwardly, both of them hyper-aware that this was different from their casual dinners at the apartment. This was official. This meant something. But gradually they relaxed. Tanya told him about her day, about a funny incident in the mailroom involving mislabeled packages. Julian told her about a difficult negotiation with a contractor. Normal conversation. Easy. "How's Bree handling this?" Julian asked over dessert. She's ecstatic. She asked if this means you'll be her dad now. I had to explain that dating doesn't automatically mean marriage and parenthood, but I don't think she fully understood. In her mind, you're already family. How do you feel about that? Tanya was quiet for a moment. It's fast. Too fast maybe. But I can't deny that it feels right. You fit into our lives like you were always supposed to be there. That should scare me more than it does. Why doesn't it? Because I've learned to trust my instincts. And my instincts say you're safe. That you care about us genuinely. That you're not going anywhere unless we push you away. I'm not going anywhere, Julian confirmed. I mean that. This isn't casual for me, Tanya. I'm all in if you are. I'm in. Scared but in. After dinner they walked through the neighborhood. The evening was cool but not cold. Holiday lights still decorated some windows, even though it was already January. Their hands found each other naturally, fingers intertwining. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Tanya said suddenly. "That's a big ask. I know. But I want to know you. The real you, not just the successful CEO version." Julian thought about it. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm enough. If all the money and success actually means anything. I've accomplished everything I set out to do, and some days I wake up and think, is this it? Is this all there is?" That's called being human. Having doubts even when everything looks perfect from the outside. What about you? Tell me something you've never told anyone. Tanya was silent for several steps. Sometimes I blame Bree. Not out loud, never out loud. But sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if I hadn't gotten pregnant so young. If I'd finished college. If I'd had time to build a career before becoming a mother. And then I feel terrible for even thinking it because she's the best thing that ever happened to me. That doesn't make you a bad mother. That makes you honest. Maybe. But it still feels like a betrayal. She didn't ask to be born. She didn't ask for any of the struggles we've faced. And she's handled it all with such grace. She deserves better than a mother who sometimes resents the sacrifice. You don't resent her. You resent the circumstances. That's different. Is it? Yes. Because when you look at her, all you feel is love. The resentment isn't directed at her. It's directed at a system that makes being a single mother so impossible. At a husband who abandoned you. At poverty and lack of opportunity. That's not the same as regretting your daughter. Tanya leaned against him. How are you so good at saying exactly what I need to hear? Practice. I spent a lot of time in therapy learning to articulate feelings. They walked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Tanya stopped and turned to face him. I want you to know something. Before this goes any further. I need you to understand who I am and where I come from. Okay. I grew up poor. Not struggling, actually poor. Food stamps and donated clothes poor. My mom worked as a home health aide. My dad left when I was 5. I don't remember him. I got pregnant with Bree when I was 23. Her father and I got married because it seemed like the responsible thing to do, but we were never really in love. We were just two scared kids trying to do the right thing. She paused, gathering her thoughts. When he left, I was devastated. Not because I loved him so much, but because I felt like a failure. Like I'd proven everyone right who said I wouldn't amount to anything. And then I spent 3 years barely surviving, working myself into the ground, watching my daughter grow up in poverty just like I did. Breaking that cycle felt impossible. And then I showed up, Julian said quietly. And then you showed up. And you broke the cycle for us. But Julian, I need you to understand that I'm still that girl from the poor neighborhood. I didn't suddenly become sophisticated just because I live in a nice apartment now. I don't know which fork to use at fancy dinners. I've never been to Europe. I can't discuss art or wine or any of the things people in your world probably talk about at parties. I don't care about any of that. You say that now. But what about when you introduce me to your friends? Your business associates? What happens when they look at me and see exactly what I am? Someone who doesn't belong in your world. Julian took both her hands in his. Tanya, listen to me. I don't have many real friends. Most of my relationships are professional. The people I know are networking contacts, not companions. They're not better than you just because they have money. Most of them are boring as hell actually. They talk about stock prices and real estate investments and they forget that there's a world outside their bubble. He squeezed her hands gently. You have more real-life experience, more practical wisdom, more genuine kindness than anyone in my so-called social circle. You raised a daughter alone while working 3 jobs. You kept going even when every system was set up to make you fail. That takes more strength than anything I've ever done. You built an empire from nothing. I built a business. That's different. You built a life. You built a family. You protected your daughter and gave her love even when you had nothing else to give. That matters more than any quarterly profit report. Tanya's eyes were wet. You really believe that? I know that. And if anyone in my world has a problem with you, then they're not people I need in my life. She kissed him then right there on the sidewalk. It was deeper than their first kiss, less tentative. When they broke apart, she was smiling. Take me home, she said. To your home. I want to see where you live. Julian's penthouse was exactly what Tanya expected and somehow more. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Modern furniture in neutral tones. Art on the walls that probably cost more than a car. Everything perfect, everything expensive. Everything sterile. It's beautiful, she said, walking to the windows. But it doesn't feel like you. What do you mean? It's like a showroom. There's nothing personal here. No photographs, no clutter, no signs that anyone actually lives in this space. Julian looked around, seeing his home through her eyes. She was right. It was a hotel suite that happened to be where he slept. Nothing more. I've never thought about it, he admitted. I'm barely here. Just to sleep and shower, mostly. That's sad. Home should be more than a place to sleep. It should be somewhere you want to be. Your apartment feels like a home. Because Bree and I actually live there. We make messes. We put things on the walls. We exist in the space instead of just passing through it. Julian pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind as they both looked out at the city lights. Maybe you could help me make this place feel more like a home. Are you sure you want that? It'll mean clutter. Bree will leave toys around. I'll reorganize your kitchen to actually make sense. It won't be pristine anymore. Good. Pristine is overrated. He rested his chin on her shoulder. I like the idea of you being here. Of this place feeling lived in. They stayed like that for a while, watching the city. Then Tanya turned in his arms and kissed him again. This time, neither of them was thinking about fears or risks or power dynamics. This time, they were just 2 people who'd found each other against all odds, deciding to take a chance on something real. Later, sitting on his expensive couch with takeout Chinese food because neither of them felt like going back out, Tanya said, "We should tell Bree tomorrow. About us being official." "How do you want to do it?" "Together. At the apartment. You should be there when I tell her. She'll want to celebrate with both of us." "What if she freaks out?" "Kids can be unpredictable about stuff like this." "She's going to be thrilled. Trust me. She's been planning our wedding in her head for weeks." Julian laughed. "No pressure. She's 6. Everything is immediate to her. But that doesn't mean we have to rush. We can take our time. Figure this out at our own pace." "I'd marry you tomorrow if you'd let me," Julian said, then froze. "I didn't mean. I'm not proposing. I just meant." Tanya pressed a finger to his lips. "I know what you meant, and it's sweet. But let's date for a while first. Let's make sure this is real and lasting before we make any big decisions." "Fair enough." They finished their food and talked until late. About everything and nothing. About hopes for the future and fears from the past. About Bree and work and how to balance new relationship energy with practical reality. When Julian finally drove Tanya home, they kissed goodnight in the car like teenagers. Sweet and lingering, neither wanting to be the first to pull away. "Tomorrow," Tanya said. "We'll tell Bree tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Julian agreed. He watched her walk into her building, watched the light turn on in her apartment window. Then he drove home feeling like his life had finally, after 38 years, started making sense. The risk was worth it. The fear was manageable. And the possibility of a real future with Tanya and Bree was worth any uncertainty. Love, he was discovering, wasn't about guarantees. It was about choosing someone every day, even when it was scary. Especially when it was scary. And Julian was ready to choose them. Every single day. The board meeting started badly and got worse. Julian had expected some questions about his personal life. His relationship with Tanya wasn't exactly secret anymore. They'd been seen together at restaurants, at Bree's school events. In a city this size, word traveled fast in certain circles. But he hadn't expected the level of hostility he encountered that Tuesday morning. Richard Sterling, one of the older board members and a significant investor, stood up midway through Julian's quarterly report. "I think we need to address the elephant in the room." Julian set down his presentation notes. "Which would be your relationship with an employee. Specifically, your relationship with Tanya Morrison. We've received complaints that it constitutes an abuse of power and creates liability for the company. Tanya and I are dating, yes. I don't see how that creates liability. She was promoted based on merit, not favoritism. Patricia Lee made that decision independently. But you facilitated her hiring in the first place," another board member, Susan Wright, chimed in. "You gave her an apartment. You paid her medical bills. And now you're in a romantic relationship with her. That looks problematic from a corporate governance standpoint." Julian kept his voice level. "I helped someone in need. That happened before she was an employee. The two situations are separate." "Are they?" Richard leaned forward. "Because from where we sit, it looks like you handpicked a vulnerable woman, created a situation where she was completely dependent on you, and then pursued her romantically. That's not a good look for Grant Industries." Anger flared in Julian's chest, but he tamped it down. "Tanya is not dependent on me. She has a job she earned through her own skills. She has housing that's guaranteed regardless of our personal relationship. I put that in writing. She has the freedom to leave if she wants to." "Does she though?" Susan pressed. "Can she really say no to you when you control her job, her housing, her entire stability? That's not consent. That's coercion. That's offensive." Julian's voice went cold. "You're suggesting I would manipulate or coerce someone? That I'm abusing my position? I'm not." "Then end the relationship," Richard said bluntly. "If she's truly free to choose, let her prove it by choosing to stay in her job after you end things. I'm not ending my relationship to appease the board's concerns. Tanya and I have done nothing wrong." "The optics are bad," Susan insisted. "You're the CEO of a major corporation. You're held to a higher standard. Dating an employee you personally hired and housed creates appearance issues even if the reality is innocent. You need to either end the relationship or we need to discuss your future with this company." The room went silent. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable. Julian looked around the table. Most of the board members looked uncomfortable but not necessarily opposed. A few nodded in agreement with Richard and Susan. His support wasn't as solid as he'd assumed. "I'll take your concerns under advisement," Julian said carefully. "But I won't make any decisions about my personal life based on corporate politics. If the board wants to call a vote of no confidence, that's your prerogative. But I won't be bullied into ending a relationship that makes me happy." He ended the meeting early and returned to his office, his mind racing. Rachel followed him in. "That was ugly," she said. "It was." Julian paced behind his desk. "They can't actually fire me, can they? I'm the majority shareholder. They can make your life difficult. They can cause problems with investors. They can create bad press. Richard Sterling has connections with several major financial publications. If he decides to make this a story, then we deal with it." Julian sat down heavily. "I'm not ending things with Tanya because the board doesn't like the optics. That's not how relationships work." "I know. But Julian, they have a point about the power dynamic. Not that you did anything wrong, but the appearance of impropriety can be just as damaging as actual impropriety. So what do you suggest?" Rachel sat down across from him. "Total transparency. Make it clear that Tanya has protections in place. Maybe bring in an independent third party to verify that her employment is secure regardless of your relationship. Show that you've thought about the ethical implications and put safeguards in place. That makes it sound like I think I did something wrong. No, it makes it sound like you're aware of how things look and you care about doing right by Tanya. That's different." Julian rubbed his face. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. The moment I let someone in, the moment I let myself be happy, it becomes ammunition. Welcome to being human, Rachel said gently. This is what everyone deals with. The difference is you have more money and more people watching. That evening, Julian went to the apartment to talk to Tanya. She met him at the door, took one look at his face and said, "What happened?" He told her everything. About the board meeting, about Richard Sterling's accusations, about the thinly veiled threat to his position. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing more troubled as he spoke. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Bree was in her room doing homework, the sound of her humming drifting down the hallway. "Maybe they're right," Tanya said finally. "What?" "Maybe this is wrong. Maybe I am too dependent on you. Maybe we rushed into this without thinking about the consequences. Don't do that. Don't let them make you doubt us." "I'm not doubting us. I'm doubting me. Julian, I don't want to be the reason you lose your company. I don't want to be a liability." "You're not a liability. You're the best thing that's happened to me in years. But I am a complication. You can't deny that. Your board is right that the optics are bad. A billionaire CEO dating an employee he essentially rescued? That's a headline waiting to happen. And not a good one." Julian moved closer, taking her hands. "So what? So we deal with bad headlines. So we face down gossip and judgment. That doesn't change what's real between us. But it could cost you everything you've built. And you're worth it." He said it simply, matter-of-factly. "You and Bree are worth any amount of professional complications." Tears filled Tanya's eyes. "You can't mean that. Your company is your life. It was my life. Now you are. Both of you. Don't you see? You've changed everything for me. Given me something to care about beyond profit margins and growth strategies. I'm not giving that up. I'm not giving you up. Even if it costs you Grant Industries? Even then. I can build another company. I can't replace you." Tanya pulled him into a hug, holding on tight. "You're crazy. You know that, right?" "Maybe. But I'm also serious. We're going to face this together. We're going to show them that our relationship is real and ethical and not something to be ashamed of." "How?" "I don't know yet. But we'll figure it out." They sat on the couch, strategizing. Tanya suggested they document everything. Every conversation, every decision about her employment, every protection he'd put in place. Create an ironclad paper trail that showed she had real autonomy and real choices. Julian called his lawyer and his PR team. By the end of the evening they had a plan. An independent audit of Tanya's employment situation. Public disclosure of the relationship with full transparency about how it started. A letter from Tanya herself, explaining her perspective. "This is going to be invasive," Julian warned. "People will dig into your past, your finances, your marriage. They'll look for any dirt they can find. Let them look. I've got nothing to hide. I was poor and I struggled and I made mistakes. But I never hurt anyone and I never lied. That has to be enough." Over the next 2 weeks they executed the plan. The independent audit came back showing that Tanya's employment was based on merit and that she had robust protections regardless of her relationship with Julian. The PR team released a carefully worded statement about their relationship, emphasizing the timeline and the safeguards. Tanya wrote an essay that was published in several outlets, telling her side of the story. About being a struggling single mother, about Julian's intervention, about falling in love despite trying not to. It was honest and raw and powerful. The response was mixed. Some people were sympathetic. Others remained skeptical. A few were outright hostile. But gradually the narrative started to shift. Instead of "billionaire takes advantage of vulnerable woman," it became "two people find love despite obstacles." Richard Sterling tried to keep pushing, but he lost support. Other board members started speaking up in Julian's defense. The independent audit had given them cover. They could support Julian without looking like they were ignoring ethical concerns. At the next board meeting, Richard called for a vote of no confidence. It failed dramatically. Only 2 board members voted with him. The rest stood with Julian. "This isn't over," Richard warned as he packed up his briefcase. "People will always question this relationship. Always wonder if she's with you for the money." "Let them wonder," Julian said calmly. "I know the truth. Tanya knows the truth. That's all that matters." After Richard left, Susan Wright approached Julian. "I owe you an apology. I jumped to conclusions. Your relationship with Ms. Morrison is clearly genuine. I'm sorry I doubted that. Thank you for saying that. For what it's worth, she seems lovely. And that essay she wrote? That took courage. Not many people would put themselves out there like that." That evening, Julian took Tanya out to celebrate. Nothing fancy, just their favorite casual restaurant. but it felt like a victory. "We did it," Tanya said, raising her wine glass. "We survived the first major test." "We did." Julian clinked his glass against hers. "Though I have a feeling there will be more tests to come." "Probably. But we'll face them together. That's what matters." They ate and talked and laughed, the stress of the past weeks finally lifting. When Julian dropped Tanya off at her apartment later, she kissed him at the door. "Thank you for fighting for us," she said. "Thank you for not giving up when it would have been easier." "I meant what I said. You're worth any fight." "Even so, not everyone would have done what you did. Most people would have chosen the easy path. Ended things to preserve their professional reputation." "I'm not most people." "No," Tanya said, smiling. "You're definitely not." Julian drove home feeling exhausted but satisfied. The battle wasn't completely over. Richard Sterling and people like him would probably never fully accept his relationship with Tanya. But he'd proven something important. To the board, to Tanya, and to himself. Love was worth fighting for. Even when the fight was hard. Even when the easier path beckoned. He'd chosen the harder path. Chosen Tanya and Bree. Chosen happiness over convenience. And he would make that choice again and again, as many times as necessary. 6 months passed. Spring turned to summer, and the relationship that had started with a whispered prayer to a department store Santa grew into something solid and enduring. Julian had practically moved into the apartment, though he kept his penthouse. Most nights found him there, having dinner with Tanya and Bree, helping with homework, watching movies on the couch. The domestic routine that had once seemed foreign now felt essential. Bree had started calling him Julian Dad, a compromise that made everyone smile. He wasn't trying to replace her biological father, but he was filling that role in her life. The distinction mattered. One Saturday morning, Julian woke up in Tanya's bed, sunlight streaming through the window. He could hear Bree in the kitchen, probably making her signature terrible pancakes that they would all pretend were delicious. Tanya slept beside him, peaceful and beautiful. This was what happiness looked like, he realized. Not the big moments or grand gestures, but these small, ordinary mornings. Waking up next to someone you loved. Hearing a child's laughter from the next room. Knowing you were exactly where you belonged. He'd been thinking about proposing for weeks. Had the ring picked out, hidden in his penthouse safe. But he kept waiting for the perfect moment, the ideal setting. Then he realized he was overthinking it. With Tanya, nothing needed to be perfect. It just needed to be real. That afternoon, he gathered Tanya and Bree in the living room. They looked at him curiously. "What's going on?" Tanya asked. "You look nervous." "I am nervous." Julian took a deep breath. "Bree, can I talk to you first? In private?" Bree's eyes went wide. "Am I in trouble?" "No, nothing like that. I just need to ask you something important." They went to Bree's room. She sat on her bed, looking up at him with serious eyes. At 7 years old now, she was growing up fast. Smart and kind and brave. "Bree, you know I love you, right?" "I know." "I love you too, Julian Dad. I also love your mom. Very much. And I want to ask her to marry me. But before I do that, I need to ask you if that's okay. Because this affects you too. If your mom says yes, I'll be your stepdad officially. I'll be part of your family permanently. How do you feel about that?" Bree was quiet for a moment. "Will you still live with us if mommy says yes?" "Yes. We'd probably get a bigger place. A house maybe, with a yard. But we'd all live together. And you won't leave like my other dad left?" Julian knelt down so he was at her eye level. "I promise you, Bree, I'm not going anywhere. Not ever. Even if your mom said no to marrying me, I'd still be in your life. You're stuck with me." "Good." Bree smiled. "Because I want you to be my dad for real. Not just Julian Dad. Real dad. So it's okay if I ask your mom to marry me?" "Yes. But Julian Dad? Can I help? Can I be there when you ask?" Julian hadn't planned on that, but looking at Bree's hopeful face, he couldn't say no. "Actually, that's perfect. Let's go ask her together." They returned to the living room where Tanya waited, looking increasingly puzzled. Julian and Bree stood in front of her, both nervous now. "What is happening?" Tanya asked, looking between them. Julian pulled the ring box from his pocket. He'd kept it in his car, waiting for the right moment. Apparently this was it. He didn't kneel. That seemed too formal for this moment. Instead, he sat on the couch beside Tanya and took her hand. 6 months ago, I heard your daughter whisper her fears to a stranger in a Santa suit. That moment changed my life. Not because I played hero, not because I got to help someone, but because it brought you and Bree into my world. You've given me something I didn't even know I was missing. A family. A home. A reason to care about more than just work. Tanya's eyes were already filling with tears. You make me laugh, Julian continued. You challenge me when I'm wrong. You support me when I'm right. You've taught me that having money means nothing if you have no one to share your life with. And Bree. He looked at the little girl who was bouncing on her toes with excitement. Bree has shown me what it means to be chosen. Not by biology but by love. She chose to let me into her life, into her heart. That means everything to me. He opened the ring box. The diamond caught the light, simple but beautiful. Tanya Morrison, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and Bree's stepdad? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making you both as happy as you've made me? Say yes, Mommy, Bree whispered loudly. Tanya was crying now, full tears streaming down her face. Yes. Yes, of course yes. Julian slipped the ring on her finger and then Bree was hugging both of them, and they were all crying and laughing at the same time. A tangle of arms and joy and relief. Can I call you Dad now instead of Julian Dad? Bree asked. Since you're going to be my real dad? You can call me whatever you want, Julian said, voice thick with emotion. I'd be honored to be your dad. Okay, Dad. Bree tested out the word, grinned and said it again. Dad. I like it. They spent the rest of the day celebrating. Called friends and family to share the news. Tanya called her mother, who cried on the phone and said she couldn't wait to meet Julian. Bree called her friend Sophia and talked excitedly about being in a wedding. That evening, after Bree had finally gone to bed, too excited to sleep but forced to anyway, Tanya and Julian sat on the couch together. She kept looking at her ring, turning her hand to watch the diamond sparkle. I can't believe this is real, she said. Sometimes I still think I'm going to wake up in that basement apartment, going to my third job, coughing blood into tissues. That life is over. This is your life now. Our life. It happened so fast. A year ago I was barely surviving. Now I'm engaged to you. It doesn't seem possible. Life can change quickly. For better or worse. We got lucky. We got better. Tanya leaned against him. What kind of wedding do you want? Big and fancy? Small and intimate? Whatever you want. I'm happy with anything as long as you're there. Small then. Just family and close friends. Nothing elaborate. Maybe outdoors if the weather cooperates. That sounds perfect. Your business associates are going to be disappointed. They probably expect a big society wedding. They can be disappointed. This wedding is about us, not them. Tanya was quiet for a moment. Julian? Thank you. For everything. For hearing Bree that day. For helping us. For loving us. You saved our lives in so many ways. You saved mine too. You just didn't realize it. I was lonely and I didn't even know it. Work had become everything because I had nothing else. You gave me something else. Something better. We're really doing this. Getting married. Becoming a family officially. We're already a family. The wedding just makes it official on paper. Still, it's a big step. Are you scared? Terrified, Julian admitted. I've never been married. Never been a parent. I have no idea if I'll be any good at it. You're already good at it. You've been practicing for 6 months. And Bree loves you completely. That's all that matters. What about you? Are you scared? Yes. My first marriage was a disaster. I'm scared this one will be too. I'm scared you'll change your mind. Scared I'm not enough for your world. Scared that one day you'll regret choosing us. I won't regret it. Ever. Even if things get hard, even if we fight sometimes, even if marriage turns out to be more difficult than we expect. I'll never regret choosing you. Promise. Promise. They sealed it with a kiss. Long and deep and full of promise. When they broke apart, both were smiling. We should start planning, Tanya said. Figure out when and where. Make a guest list. Tomorrow. Tonight, let's just sit here and be happy. So they did. They sat in the quiet apartment, engaged and in love and ready to face whatever came next. Together. Outside, the city hummed with activity. Somewhere, other people were struggling. Other single mothers were working too many jobs, too sick to rest, too scared to ask for help. Other children were whispering fears to strangers, hoping for rescue. Julian couldn't save them all. But he'd save these two. His family. And tomorrow he would start thinking about how to help more people. How to use his resources to break the cycles that trapped families like Tanya and Bree had been trapped. Maybe establish a foundation. Maybe fund programs for single mothers. Maybe create pathways for people to escape poverty. But tonight was just for them. For celebrating their engagement. For holding on to this perfect moment before life got complicated again. Because life would get complicated. It always did. But they would face it together. And that made all the difference. The wedding was scheduled for a Saturday in October, exactly 1 year after Julian had first heard Bree's whispered plea to Santa. Tanya insisted on the timing. She wanted to mark the anniversary of when their lives had changed forever. They'd found a small venue outside the city. A garden with autumn flowers and trees painted in shades of red and gold. Nothing ostentatious, nothing designed to impress. Just a beautiful space where they could gather with people they loved. The guest list was deliberately small. Tanya's mother and a few relatives. A handful of Julian's genuine friends, not business contacts. Patricia Lee and several colleagues from Grant Industries who had become real friends to Tanya. Bree's friend Sophia and a few of her classmates. Maybe 50 people total. Tanya wore a knee-length blue dress, simple and elegant. Bree was her flower girl, wearing red as requested, practically vibrating with excitement. Julian wore a dark suit, nothing flashy. They'd agreed to keep everything understated. This wasn't about showing off. It was about making promises and meaning them. The ceremony itself was brief. They'd written their own vows. Tanya went first, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. Julian, a year ago I was drowning. I didn't know it at the time. I thought I was doing what needed to be done, staying strong for my daughter. But I was drowning. You threw me a lifeline. Not just money or housing or a job, that you gave me all those things. You gave me hope. You showed me that kindness still exists. That sometimes people help just because they can, not because they want something in return. She paused, collecting herself. You loved me when I couldn't understand why you would. You saw value in me that I'd stopped seeing in myself. You gave Bree a father who chooses to be here, who shows up every day with patience and love. You've taught us both what family can be, what love should be. I promise to spend the rest of my life showing you that your faith in us wasn't misplaced. I promise to love you fiercely, to challenge you when you need it and support. You always, to build a life with you that matters. To never forget where we came from or take for granted where we are now. Julian had to clear his throat several times before he could speak. Tanya, I spent most of my life building walls. Protecting myself from loss by never letting anyone close enough to hurt me. I told myself I was fine alone. That success was enough. And then I heard Bree asking Santa to save you, and something in me broke open. Or maybe it was something that had been broken finally starting to heal. He smiled at Bree, who was watching with wide, teary eyes. You and Bree didn't just let me help you. You let me love you. You trusted me with your fears and your hopes. You made space for me in your lives. That's a gift I'll never stop being grateful for. I promise to be worthy of that gift. To be the father Bree deserves. To be the husband you need. To show up every day and choose you both over and over. To remember that having everything means nothing if you have no one to share it with. And to never, ever take a single moment with you for granted. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden by the time they exchanged rings. When the officiant pronounced them married, Bree cheered loudly enough that everyone laughed through their tears. The reception was casual. Food served family style. Dancing on a small patio. Toasts that were heartfelt rather than polished. Julian's old therapist made a joke about him actually taking her advice about opening up to people. Patricia Lee told embarrassing stories about Tanya's first week in the mailroom. Tanya's mother welcomed Julian to the family with tears and fierce hugs. But the moment that mattered most came later that evening. After the cake was cut and the formal events were done, Julian found Bree sitting at a table, swinging her legs and watching the adults dance. He sat down beside her. Having fun. The best time ever. This is even better than my birthday party. I'm glad. Julian adjusted his tie, which was starting to feel tight. Hey Bree, I have something for you. A present? Sort of. He pulled out a folder he'd been keeping in his jacket. Inside were legal documents, carefully prepared by his lawyers. These are adoption papers. If you're okay with it, I'd like to adopt you officially. Make you my daughter legally, not just in our hearts. Bree's eyes went huge. Really? You want to adopt me? More than anything. But only if you want me to. It's your choice. What happens if you adopt me? Your last name would change to Grant, if you wanted to. Or you could hyphenate and keep Morrison too. And legally I'd be your dad. If anything ever happened to your mom, God forbid, I'd be your legal guardian. You'd inherit from me the same as any biological child would. In every way that matters, you'd be mine. Bree threw her arms around his neck. Yes, I want you to adopt me. I want to be your daughter for real. Tanya appeared then, drawn by the commotion. When Julian explained what was happening, she started crying all over again. Happy tears this time. You didn't tell me you were doing this? she said. I wanted it to be a surprise. For both of you. When? We can file the papers next week if Bree wants. The process takes a few months, but it's pretty straightforward when everyone consents. Tanya pulled both of them into a hug. Their small family wrapped in each other's arms, while the party continued around them. Later that evening, after the reception ended and they were driving home as a family for the first time, Bree fell asleep in the back seat. Julian glanced in the rearview mirror at her peaceful face. She's going to be impossible tomorrow, Tanya said quietly. Too excited to sleep tonight, then exhausted and cranky. Worth it though. Definitely worth it. They'd decided not to have a honeymoon yet. Wanted to settle into married life first, figure out their new normal. They had time. A whole life ahead of them. But Julian had one more surprise planned. A stop he wanted to make before going home. Do you mind if we make a detour? He asked. At 10 o'clock at night? Trust me. He drove to the department store where this had all started. It was closed now, dark except for security lights. But the holiday decorations were already going up for the season, including the Santa display. Why are we here? Tanya asked. Come on. I want to show you something. They got out of the car. Julian carefully lifted sleeping Bree into his arms. She stirred but didn't wake, just tucked her head against his shoulder. They stood on the sidewalk where Julian had stood a year ago, listening to a little girl's desperate prayer. The spot where everything had changed. This is where I heard her, Julian said quietly. Right here. I was walking to my car thinking about work. And then I heard Bree telling Santa that you were sick but still working. That she was scared you wouldn't wake up one morning. Tanya looked at the store window, at the empty Santa chair waiting for next month's holiday rush. I had no idea she was that worried. She never said anything to me. Kids protect their parents. Just like parents protect kids. She was carrying that fear alone because she didn't want to add to your burdens. And you heard her. Out of all the people walking past this store that day, you were the one who heard her and cared enough to do something. I don't think it was random, Julian admitted. I think I was supposed to hear her. I think you were both supposed to come into my life. Some things are meant to be. I don't know if I believe in fate, Tanya said. But I believe in kindness. And I believe that you chose to care when you could have just kept walking. That choice changed everything. They stood there for a few more minutes, holding their sleeping daughter, looking at the place where their story had begun. Then Julian said, I have one more thing to tell you. I've been working on something. A foundation. It's called the Second Chances Foundation. It's going to help single parents who are struggling. Provide emergency funds for medical care, housing assistance, job training, childcare support. Everything you needed but couldn't access. Tanya turned to look at him. Julian, that's amazing. How long have you been planning this? A few months. I've been working with my lawyers and financial advisors to set it up properly. We're launching next month. And I want you to help run it. You know what people in these situations need better than anyone. You've lived it. Me? Run a foundation? Co-direct it. With me. You'd have a real say in how the money gets distributed, what programs we fund. Your experience is valuable. Essential, actually. I don't have the education for something like that. You have something better. You have understanding. Empathy. You know the difference between help that actually helps and help that just makes the giver feel good. That's what we need. Tanya was quiet for a long moment. When Bree made that wish to Santa, I was so scared. Scared of losing my job, scared of getting sicker, scared of what would happen to her if I couldn't work anymore. I felt so alone. Like the whole world had forgotten we existed. And now I want to make sure no one else feels that alone. If we can help even one family the way you helped us, it's worth it. I'm in. Let's do this. Julian kissed her, careful not to jostle Bree. Thank you. For saying yes to all of it. The marriage, the foundation, the adoption. For taking a chance on me. Thank you for hearing my daughter when she needed someone to listen. Thank you for not walking past. They got back in the car and drove home. To their new house, actually. A place with a yard and enough room for everyone to have their own space. Bree's room was painted in her favorite colors. The kitchen was big enough for all of them to cook together. There was a home office where Tanya could work on foundation business. It was the kind of home Tanya had dreamed about but never thought she'd have. The kind of home Bree deserved. The kind of home Julian had never known he wanted until he had people to share it with. They carried Bree inside and tucked her into bed. She mumbled something about cake and flower girl dresses, still half asleep. They kissed her forehead and left a night light on the way she liked it. In their own room, getting ready for bed, Tanya said, I keep thinking about all the things that had to happen for us to end up here. My husband leaving. Me getting sick. Not having enough money for doctors. Bree talking to that Santa. You walking by at exactly that moment. Any one of those things changes and we never meet. Do you wish any of it had been different? Easier? Yes and no. I wish Bree hadn't had to go through the hard times. I wish I hadn't been so sick and scared. But I don't wish we'd never met. I don't wish this hadn't happened. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. I wish you hadn't suffered. But I'm grateful our paths crossed. Both things can be true. They got into bed, turning out the lights. Through the window, city lights twinkled in the distance. Closer, they could hear the gentle sounds of their neighborhood. A dog barking. A car passing. Normal life sounds. Julian? Tanya said into the darkness. I love you. I know I said it in my vows, but I wanted to say it again. Just us, no audience. I love you. I love you too. Both of you. My family. Your family, Tanya agreed. How does it feel? Like coming home, Julian said. Like everything I worked for finally has a purpose. Like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms in the home they'd built together, with their daughter sleeping safely down the hall. And in a department store across town, an empty Santa chair waited for next month's season. Waited for other children to whisper their fears and hopes. Waited for other prayers to be sent out into the universe. Some of those prayers would go unanswered. That was the harsh reality. But because of the Second Chances Foundation, because Julian had heard one little girl's whisper and decided to act, some of them wouldn't. Some families would get the help they needed. Some children would stop worrying about whether their parent would wake up in the morning. Some struggling mothers and fathers would find a path forward. One whispered prayer had changed 3 lives. Now those 3 lives would work to change countless others. That was the real magic. Not Santa Claus or miracles or fate. But people choosing kindness. People choosing to help when they could. People choosing love over indifference. Julian Grant had heard a little girl whisper, and he hadn't stayed silent. He'd acted. And that action had rippled outward, creating new possibilities, new hope, new chances for people who thought their chances had run out. This was the power of compassion. The transformative force of seeing someone else's suffering and deciding it mattered. That they mattered. A year ago, Tanya Morrison had been drowning in poverty and illness, fighting alone to keep her daughter safe. Bree had been a scared child carrying worries too big for her small shoulders. Now they were a family. Safe, secure, loved. With a future full of possibility instead of dread. All because someone heard. Someone listened. Someone cared enough to act. The story that had started with desperation and fear ended with love and hope. With a family united not by biology but by choice. With a foundation that would help others the way they'd been helped. Some might call it a fairy tale ending. But it was better than that. It was real. Earned through honesty and effort and the courage to trust. Built on a foundation of genuine care and shared commitment. It was the kind of ending that could become someone else's beginning. The kind of story that inspired action instead of just tears. And that, Julian thought as he drifted off to sleep beside his wife, was the best kind of ending there was. The kind that refused to be an ending at all, but instead became a starting point for something even better. A whisper had changed everything. Now their voices together would continue to echo. Helping. Healing. Creating new stories of hope. This was what love did. It expanded outward, touching lives beyond its own. It refused to be contained or limited. It grew and spread and transformed everything it touched. One family saved by kindness. Now saving others in turn. Coming full circle. Starting again. Building a better world, one whispered prayer at a time.